Carl, Thanksgiving week. Let me make sure because the last conversation I posted the wrong date. I quote dated the wrong. I said September and it was in November. So it is the week of Thanksgiving 2025. Today is November 20. I don't even want to say the date. It's the week of Thanksgiving. We'll just say that. And
Okey doke.
let me turn it over to you and ask you, where do you want to start?
Well, I think we should probably start this AI stuff that is starting to detonate around people's ears. I mean, lighting firecrackers out in the yard is fun. Having one go off right next to your ear, not so much. Uh, the NVIDIA just a few days ago reported earnings, and they had a blowout number. There is a curse that comes with being a public company, and that is your gross margin becomes, part of your financials. It's not hideable. One of the things I liked about being a privately held company when I was doing my internet thing was that nobody knew what it was. I knew what it was, but I sure didn't come out there and trumpet it. And the reason is that the basic law of business balance has always been that somewhere around 10% gross margin, a little higher is when you cross that threshold, you go higher than that, it becomes worth it for people to try to shoot at you. Okay, so when the average grocery store has an operating margin of 1.5%, all right? But 10% is always, in any line of business, has always been a threshold that once you cross it, you attract competition. And it's not really rocket science. It's that if I'm making 15, and somebody thinks they can undercut me by 2, they can severely damage or maybe even put me out of business. Okay, so they will shoot at me. When you get under 10%, it's not worth trying because the return on investment is not high enough. All right, so there still will be people that will do it, but that's kind of the rule. So NVIDIA comes out with crazy numbers as they have in terms of gross margin, as they have for a while. And a lot of people on social media were talking about, well, the receivables are going up, and and this is going up, and that's going up. And I wrote an article and I said, yeah, they are going up, but they're going up slower than sales are. That's actually good. Okay, I mean, if I've got a 50% increase in revenues and I got a 25% increase in receivables, that's an improvement in my operating condition. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. So, because obviously, if I'm selling more, I've got more outstanding, right, in the pipeline that hasn't been paid for yet. So I couldn't find anything in their quarterly report that made my eyebrows go up or the hair go up on the back of my neck. But that's the problem, is that their operating margin is up in the stratosphere. And so when you look at that and you look at the gross numbers, because you never know what kind of efficiency the company has internally. I mean, you have what they talk about. If you don't, but gross margin's gross margin. I mean, it is what it is. You paid this much to make the stuff, and then you sold it for X. And then everything else, of course, has to come out of that SG&A and all that. So I said, look, nobody runs around with 30, 40, 50% gross margins without people shooting at you. The only way you can prevent it is if you have a moat, such as patent protections. Problem that NVIDIA has is that the CUDA language that has become the basis for all this AI stuff was patented, was invented a hell of a long time ago. Patents are gone, all right? All the moat's gone. And you have a bunch of other companies that are large foundry producers that have the capacity to take a crack at these guys from that standpoint. All right? They have the ability to do it. So you have the Intels, you have the AMDs, you have the folks that are making Google's Tensor chips that are in their phones. You have Broadcom, you have TS. I mean, there's more than one NVIDIA class chip company out in the world. It's not just one. And I said, this is a problem. This is a very serious problem because their stock price is entirely predicated on that margin. If you draw competition and they undercut you, you are now going to be forced to cut the price of your products. Well, your margin comes in, your stock price is a levered version of your operating margin. And so when that happens, your stock price is going to go down and not a little. This is a serious problem. I mean, I'm not saying it isn't good as long as it lasts. I'm just saying you are going to attract competitive pressure. And for good reason, simply because people can beat you around the ears with a broomstick. All right. Well, it didn't take very long. Google comes out and says, we're doing our own chips. F you. Now they are a major NVIDIA customer. And now you have other people that are looking at following suit. Oops. Now Google yesterday, shortly after saying this, got a nice big stock ramp because, oh boy, this is great. Well, no, actually it's not great. You're not going to get a 50% margin out of your stuff either. You're not going to be able to do that because otherwise the other guys are still going to beat you. So guess what? Margins are going to come down. Right? So now, that pump basically came back off, or at least most of it. And NVIDIA, continues to trade, flat to negative. And that's just at the start. People have not gotten this through their head, what this really means. It means that this business of so-called AI chips is on its way to becoming commoditized. And as it becomes commoditized, the margins are going to come down to the level of any other commodity product, which is in the neighborhood of 10%. And all the inflated stock prices that have come out of this are all going to go back where they ought to be as a result of that. The other problem you have within the sector, and I've been talking about this for a long time, nobody has demonstrated anything in the large language model / hyperscale space, anything that approaches a profitable business from building those. No one. They're all projecting huge revenue numbers.
This episode is brought to you by Vaulted, launched by McIlvaney Financial Group. The simplest and most affordable way to own physical gold and silver. Physical gold is the only asset outside of the control of the government and banking system. They can print dollars, but they can't print gold. Click on the promo link in the show notes or go to vaulted.blbvux.net/coffeeandamike.
But they have huge expense numbers. And by the way, they're all saying, well, this is going to grow 50% or 100% or 200%, every year for the next 5 years. Oh, really? The people that buy those services aren't going to buy them unless they make a profit buying and using them. Show me the profitable lines of business. IBM had something out, a white paper out not long ago that said basically, spend $1, get back 60 cents. Oh, that's nice. Okay, so every dollar you spend, you lit 40 cents of it on fire. Somehow that doesn't seem to be a winning business model for me. It's supposed to be spend $1, get back 250. Okay. I mean, that's how things have to work. Now, that doesn't mean that AI is worthless. It most certainly is not. I mean, as an example, on my forum, there's a search function that works using traditional database technology, not AI. But the way it works is because languages have all roots to their words. So a word has a plural form, it has a singular form, it has a past participle form in many cases, it has all these different forms. But if you want to index those, the most efficient way to do it is to not do each of the individual forms because, by the way, it's all the same word. It's just used in a different context. What you want to do is actually index the stems and discard all the articles that nobody would search on. Who's going to search on the word the and actually want to return from the word the? Nobody. Okay? So and that's a huge percentage of the whole. So you take that, you stem all the words, that now compresses the database size that you're indexing on to something relatively small, and now you can use a traditional indexing mechanism, and you can do Boolean searches. The result of this is that across extremely large data sets, the search time is tiny. Okay, so just as an example, there's almost 4.25 million, about 4.25 million individual messages in general, and something on the order of 250,000 topic articles that are in that database, going back all the way to 2007. You can put in a Boolean search term and it will come back with the results across that entire thing in 0.2 of a second. Okay, essentially, I mean, from your perspective, that's instantaneous. You click the mouse and there it is. Okay, and it'll give you the, the most recent 100 matches, which is the way that I have it set up. And then if you want to, you can range select to get the 100 you want based upon the date in which they were put in. Now, that kind of efficiency, if I then put a weighting system on top of that, which is what AI systems are basically, I can get even more refined. So if I was to take, for example, my inventory flow within a business and apply an artificial intelligence model to it, which is simply that kind of an indexing plus a weighting system, I'll get actionable intelligence out of that. And I can buy a box right now that will sit on someone's desk. It's about 10 grand that will deliver that kind of capability in a small, medium, or large business. Well, that's not very expensive. That's, it's the price of what? Three higher end gaming computers, right? That's not a lot of money. Now, of course, I have to develop the model and, and the software that runs on it. But you're never going to make, you're selling one of those to a company. These hyperscale guys that are buying these things are buying 25, 30, 50,000 of these processors at a time. Where do you think you're going to sell the output of that? 50 times $10,000. Okay, and then, oh, by the way, you just bought that. You have to power it. Now you got the operating cost. Now you have the building to put it in, the air conditioning, the electricity,
and you have to water.
So, yeah, the cooling, everything else. By the way, how much in sales do you have to generate in order to be able to amortize that out and have it actually work? I don't see the revenue model for any of those services that actually works. Now, in the smaller scale, yes, there's a lot of applications, and it does work, and it's relational databases have been a business breakthrough in terms of what they give you access to. We were using them in MCS, and they gave me a great deal of actionable intelligence. Who's using what? How much utilization do we have here, there, whatever have you? Fabulous planning tool from a business perspective. And the the data that it got was directly real time from the people who were actually using the system. Okay, so that's fine. And that there is a business in. But it's nowhere near what these guys are hyping. And so you've got two problems. One is that you have collapsing margins, which are going to continue. This isn't even realized yet. This is just announcements at this point. But the realization is going to come because you are commoditizing this industry. There is no moat to prevent people from shooting at you. It's very similar to what happened with IBM and Compaq in the early days of the PC. The first iteration of MCS, my company, we did exactly that. We figured out how to build compatible PCs that were cheaper than the Compaqs and the IBMs. They had some advantages in terms of performance because I was able to identify some components that were actually better and faster. We were able to sell them much cheaper. IBM and Compaq had outrageously high margins into the business channels. We were able to undercut them, and we could offer 4-hour on-site service because we had spares sitting in our office that were right there in Chicago. Okay, well, did we put IBM and Compaq out of the PC business? Well, of course not, but we were certainly part of what ultimately decimated their PC business, and it all went to the offshore Taiwanese and Japanese clones. And we were part of that. We were part of doing that, and we made a nice amount of money doing it too. Okay, but nobody in their right mind would ever try to suggest that we were making 40% on those machines. The whole reason we were able to do it was because we weren't. All right, well, guess what? That goes and whacks on the guys that are, because the only way that they can stay relevant and competitive in that marketplace is to cut the price. So, this is now starting. There are still going to be people out there that are going to tell you, oh, no, that's not the way it's going to go. This is different. It's special. No, it's not. Every line of technology throughout history has run the same way. and the moats that, that have been there by being first adopter. You can try to protect them with patents, but patents run out. And the CUDA language, and this is a point that I made a long time ago, a few years back, is that I wasn't convinced that CUDA was going to be the only AI language. That's the one that runs on the NVIDIA chips. But that even if they won on that basis, that the fat margin problem was going to come back and bite them because their intellectual property protections on that were going to run out. And when they did, they were cooked. Okay. And that's not to say they're going out of business. They're not. But it is to say that their valuations are stupid and that problem's going to go away. And so that's, we're seeing the beginnings of that. Now there's a lot of people that are going to try to argue otherwise. Don't be surprised if, the ramp job continues for a little while as a rotation from one name to another. You say, well, that means that Amazon doesn't have to pay as much for their AI resources, which they're using in their internal business. That means their valuation should go up. Yeah, Amazon's not the only guy out there. Walmart.com is going to have the same access at the lower price too. It seems to me they both sell merchandise through online stores, right? And Walmart's not exactly a small competitor either. So, I mean, but this is what happens as commoditization occurs, and it's to the benefit of the common person.
What are your thoughts on, you probably saw in the headlines that Michael Burry had shorted both NVIDIA and Palantir, and man, he's so cryptic with his posts on X. He put his...
Now he's trying to sell a newsletter, so no surprise.
Yeah, he started a Substack.
Yeah.
Today was supposed to be an announcement, wasn't today?
I don't know if it's Substack or if it's something else, but I saw something on X. I don't pay much attention to X anymore, but I saw something that he's now selling a fairly high dollar newsletter, which okay, that's fine. Hey, if you people want to pay that kind of money and get your insight, if they make money on it, then who's arguing, right? It's worth it. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, the part of the problem that he had running a hedge fund with client money is that clients, hedge funds these days are improperly named. They ought to be called high beta speculative funds because they don't hedge. Okay, a hedge fund is supposed to take risk out of a portfolio. And the problem with that, of course, is the only way to do it is when you buy insurance against a bad thing. You buy car insurance and you don't really want to wreck the car, right? But if you do, it protects you from taking a huge loss. You buy fire insurance on your house, not because you want a fire, okay? But every time you lose the bet, and you expect to lose the bet, you flush the money you paid for the insurance down the toilet. And so that's the way insurance works. So if you are truly hedging, and I put hedges on when I have positions open sometimes if I think that there's potential for serious risk. If I lose the bet, then I make less of a return. I give up some of the return because I have to pay the cost of the hedge, and that's money that's burnt. Okay, that's the way it works. They aren't hedge funds anymore. They're leveraged speculative bets that operate from a privileged capital position. We have one of the bad things that happened that came out of the crash in '08 is that we had the Dodd-Frank law, and but more importantly, we also had the Federal Reserve change. They stuck into the final bailout bill that passed the ability to set the reserve ratio for banks to 0. Now, I raised hell about it at the time, and I said this is a profoundly unsound thing. And they replaced that tool with haircuts and leverage ratios and types of asset qualifications. So a loan to one entity has a different risk weighting and therefore haircut in those computations than does a loan to another. And the problem with this kind of a scheme, instead of saying, okay, there's a flat 10% reserve ratio on loans that you have to maintain, it doesn't matter who the borrower is, it's 10%, is that what you end up doing is you screw all the smaller borrowers. because the larger firm obviously has the much larger balance sheet. They have a much lower risk rating than does the entrepreneur. Over time, this is extremely destructive to progress in any economy. And the reason is that most job growth and most innovation actually comes out of small firms. And so what you're essentially doing is kneecapping those people. And then if you couple that with a refusal to enforce any kind of antitrust or trade dress theft, especially when you allow it to go on overseas across international boundaries, then you got real trouble, because now the little guy that invents something has essentially a zero chance of getting it into the market without somebody either stealing it or just plain out competing him, because he's paying 10% on his money and the guy who's competing with him is paying 2%. All right, well, he can't make any profit doing that. All right, and so he gets forced to sell to the Amazons or whoever, and this over time destroys innovation. But this is the world we live in today, and so there you go. I mean, we're not going to turn that clock back short of an utter catastrophe, and there is essentially no way. I mean, I said at the time, this is a horrible thing to allow to have gone through Congress and actually end up codified into statute. But it did pass, and I think you'd have to have a revolution to get rid of it at this point, because every single congressperson has been bought in regards to this. To put the reserve ratio back at 10% where it ought to be, I just don't see it happening.
So the other thing with AI, with these data centers that are being built all over the country, to your point, they're not making any money, but yet they're continuing to build these things. It's unbelievable.
You'll do that right up until the point that people start to default, because I mean, at some point you have to make money, right? And if you don't, then this is going to be an issue. So I mean, is it tomorrow? Probably not. But how long do people continue to basically pour money into a cash furnace and light it on fire? I have my doubts that this goes much further. I think, when you start talking about people going out there and blowing tens or hundreds of billions of dollars, somebody's going to say, where's the return on this investment? All right, and so far, I just don't see the return on the investment. So, the problem with the large language stuff and the open input, if you will, artificial thing, is that very small amounts of pollution in the input data destroy the integrity of the output. That's very hard to police, if not impossible. So I'll just give you one example. There's a guy running around that has a thing called Brighteon, which is one of the AIs, that claims that this stuff is going to put doctors out of business. Okay, because it's better, faster, cheaper. Okay, nice claim. So I went on it and asked. I mean, he's got it open. You don't have to pay. All right, fine. I go on there and asked, and said, is DTaP a vaccine? And the answer came back was yes. Well, no, it's not. The original DTP shot was a vaccine because the definition of a vaccine is it provides sterile immunity. The AP version of that does not provide sterile immunity. There's a huge thing going on right now about cases of pertussis, and they're saying, make sure your kids, make sure you are up to date on your booster, because, well, this is the same garbage we went through with COVID and with the flu. Okay, these are non-sterilizing shots. They're a personal prophylaxis. The problem, in particular with pertussis, is that among very young infants who are too young to build an immune response and therefore can't take the shot, even if you wanted to give it to them, is that in a very young infant, the breathing reflex is insufficiently developed, and the whooping cough can cause them to stop breathing. Obviously, if you stop breathing, you die. Okay, so it can kill them. And the issue with a non-sterilizing shot is that you, having taken it, will get pertussis. You can give it to the kid, but all you have is a mild cold. So you don't even realize you have a serious disease. You just think you got the sniffles. And you give that baby a fatal infection. All right, now this is, this is a very serious public health matter. And yet, and by the way, this was directly caused by our FDA and our government after they screwed up the original shot and they injured a bunch of kids and killed a few in the 1970s. All right, and that's where the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act came from that gave them immunity. But it also caused that shot to be reformulated. Rather than the FDA forcing the manufacturers to fix their manufacturing problem, they let them do that instead. Okay, so we went from a disease that was nearly eradicated, less than 1,000 cases a year in the United States, pertussis, whooping cough. Now we have over 20,000 a year. Now, I got the original version of it because I was given it before that happened. So I can't get pertussis, nor can I give it to someone else. But my daughter, for example, got the reformulated one. She could get it, she wouldn't even know she has it. And she could give it to a baby. And I have no way to know that she's sick. All right? That's the kind of, but see, the thing is, this guy claims, he's got a better vaccine database than the mainstream media. And oh, by the way, he's going to make your doctor obsolete. Well, that thing just prattled out the same crap that the doctor tells you. Okay? And it's factually wrong. So, garbage in, garbage out. All right, and this is the issue, is that if you're from your youngest age, my daughter, when she was a little itty bitty kid, had a imperfect, but she had a bullshit filter. She knew if I was bullshitting her. Not always, but a good part of the time. Okay? Computer, it doesn't have one. There's no way to give it one. We don't know why you have one. My cat has a bullshit filter. It's not very perfect. I can trick it with some treats. but it does have one, okay? I mean, I want to go outside. There's snow out there. First time, takes 2 steps. Screw that. Next time, see snow, maybe not. So, I mean, but that's the thing, is that we all have that. It's artificial, but it's not intelligent. That's the way I tend to put it. So I don't see, across open data sets, I don't see any way to prevent that kind of pollution. And the work that's been done so far says that the more complex the model, the lower the percentage of garbage that has to be in the input before it starts spewing crap. Now that actually makes sense. That's a fairly basic mathematical thing. And it's the same thing that bedevils quantum computers. And nobody's figured out how to fix it there either. I don't know if you remember, but a few years ago, quantum computers were supposed to be the end of cryptography.
I have people, not to interrupt you, Carl, but I have people still talk to me about quantum computing. And that's another one of those things that I don't grasp.
Well, quantum computing essentially is, the theory is that it gets around some of the physical, it doesn't violate the laws of physics because you can't, but it circumvents some of the physical limitations, particularly when it comes to factoring very large numbers, which of course is what would break cryptography.
Can you give me an example?
Well, you rely on this when you go to a web page and make a purchase. There is a published part of the encryption that does the keying called the public key. That part is visible to everybody. And when you use HTTPS, that part, because it's visible to everybody, is used to connect to the other end. The other end has a private key, which only they have. Nobody else has it. If I encrypt something using one of them and send it to the other, even I can't decrypt it anymore unless I have the other one. Okay, so once someone with a private key encrypts something and sends it to you with the public side, it can be decoded. If I send something using the public side, though, once it's encrypted, Using the public side, I can't get it back. The only person who can get it back is the guy on the other end with the private half. Now, this relies on being able to come up with very large prime numbers. In other words, numbers you can't factor, okay, that don't have any factors. If you can break one of those from having the other, the entire scheme collapses, because now I know what the private key is. I can figure out what it is. Okay, and if I can do that, I can break it trivially. That's a problem. And then you use that to establish a session key, and then the session key is used for a conventional two-way cipher like AES, and that's what actually provides the encryption across the link. But that keying changes on a regular basis every time you have a session. So every time you click another page, that's a new session. The keying may get reused, it may not, but there's a system that prevents them from being replayed called perfect forward secrecy that's used to permute that. But quantum cryptography threatens to break that. It also threatens to break that same kind of asymmetrical keying that's used on blockchain, which makes it possible to steal all your Bitcoin. So if that actually ever works, all of these so-called cryptocurrencies are instantaneously worthless because I can counterfeit them. All right, so they're immediately able to be counterfeited. Now, the problem with the quantum computing is that as you increase the size of it, the error rate goes up. On conventional servers, you use error correcting memory because cosmic rays cause errors every now and then. And that would be catastrophic. On a desktop computer, if it happens, your program crashes. On a server, if it happens, it can corrupt your data. So as a result, you pay the extra money to have error correcting memory. Nobody's figured out how to make that work in the quantum computing world. So as you make a more complex quantum computer, the risk of an error being in there rises. And it rises fast enough that when you get to something that's actually usable as a computer, as opposed to a demonstration project in a room somewhere that costs, God knows how much money, you get garbage out of it often enough that it's not usable. And the same mathematical problem so far appears to apply to so-called artificial intelligence, in that you don't need much. I mean, the numbers I've seen is 1 or 2% of the data that gets fed into one of these large language models is trash, and you essentially get straight hallucinations. You just get garbage out of the other end of it. And unless that can be controlled, and without a bullshit filter, I don't know how you do it. Okay, I mean, so against closed data sets, you don't have this problem. All right, if I give it my invoice file, those are facts. I mean, I don't have that problem. You pointed at Wikipedia, or PubMed, for example, in the medical realm, which is full of stuff that is non-replicable studies that when somebody else ran the same data, they didn't get the same answer. Well, one of those two is garbage. Well, how does the AI know which one is garbage? It doesn't. And so it eats all of it, and there's enough junk in there that it destroys the quality of the result.
When I had Melody Wright on, she was talking about standard mortgage docs, and the OCR was still not working the way it should. And these are standard mortgage documents where they don't change. The font size doesn't change. It's 8.5 by 11, the spacing, what have you, and yet still the OCR was not, producing the same results.
No, but you know what? If you look at it, you can read it
with your own eyes.
Yeah, with eyes. Yeah. Right, because you have a error correcting filter in your brain. You have a bullshit filter. You can look at something and that's implausible. You look at it again, oh, that's what it means. That's what it is. The computer doesn't have that.
Yeah, when she's been on here a couple of times over the last couple of months, and one of the things she said, and I'm kind of starting to lean this way, or not even kind of, I'm leaning this way. I mean, they're doing all these layoffs and saying AI, 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 but it's really just a smokescreen for how shitty the labor market is.
Yeah, it's interesting because I have some anecdotal stuff and that's all it is, because I can't quantify how consistent it is across industries. All right. So, I mean, that you hear a report from one person, one place doesn't necessarily mean it generalizes at all. But I'm seeing people get pushed hard on what I like to call no payroll expansion. So, you do technical support for somebody in a particular area. So, they've got a computer problem with, say Windows, right? And, their machine is crashing, it's giving them blue screens or whatever. And all of a sudden, you get basically told that your job now includes upselling anytime you get somebody on the phone. And your quality metrics for you as an employee are going to include how many, say, Office 365 subscriptions you sell. And so now, every conversation you have with somebody in trying to solve their problem, you're expected to probe them as to whether or not they potentially would be a buyer for something else that the company has. And if so, to push it. Okay. Well, you're not getting paid extra for that. It just becomes part of your job description. And I'm seeing that kind of thing show up in a bunch of different areas where, because, sales, having run a business, I can tell you sales is an art form. There are a subset of people that can sell ice cubes to Eskimos. I don't know how the hell they do it, but they do. All right, and I had a couple of them that worked for me. They were very good at it. And, they got paid on commission. They made a lot of money. But there were times they got a bigger check than I did. That's kind of scary. But it's an art form. Okay. And some people are just very good at it, but the average person is not. And when you start shoving that into your enterprise, what it tells me is that you're running out of ways to generate revenue. And that's not a good sign. Okay. And I think we're getting an affordability friction both at the consumer and the business level in terms of operating results. People have pushed. And again, all I got to do is look at the multiples in the market as a whole, right? Where's the multiple across the entire S&P 500, across the entire NASDAQ? Okay, take the idea that it's, people say, well, you take these 7 stocks out of the S&P 500, look at, what's the S&P 493 look like in terms of return, and the average is pretty crappy, right? But I think there's more to it than that. I think it's more complicated because the multiples are very high across the board, not just in those 7 stocks. And that's where those reports are not coming from people that I don't know people that work in those 7 firms. Okay. But I do know people that work in a lot of different firms because I have a lot of friends. And almost universally, outside of education, where of course this isn't part of the game, I'm getting these kinds of anecdotal reports that people are being pushed to do this. So
the other thing is too, and I can only go off past experiences in my little lens of what I see, but
right.
I look at where I came from, the field I used to work in. I mean, there were so many bullshit jobs that you could eliminate and wouldn't make one bit of difference. Or they invest in these departments. Like I could take marketing, for example, where you'd bring these people in and they content, right? That's the word, content. And
right.
they create these YouTube channels and they spend all this money creating these videos, but yet you can't show me any rate of return that this is bringing any revenue in. And I remember getting being in a discussion and looking at the YouTube channel, and it had I don't know, 8 views or something, 10 views, nothing, right?
Right.
And yet there was a report where the person was like, "Yo, but the engagement is in the thousands or so." I'm like, "Well, I'm looking at your channel. There's 6 views on this thing."
How'd you get thousands? Right. Yeah.
Right. Well, I don't know where these reports would come from, but I'm like, okay, so can you show me any type of some revenue that came from this? Like a CFO saw this video, was like, oh, I mean, you could, and again, I'm going off my past experiences here, but you could, so many of those departments, they just waste so much money, but yet I mean, maybe these boomer owners, some of them don't realize like what's going on or whatnot. But like that, to me, you can eliminate a lot of marketing positions. HR.
Yeah.
Do you need a HR generalist? Do you need a people officer? Whatever the hell. I don't even know what they call them now. People officer, people's champion, whatever the fuck it is.
You got, Michael, you have so much of this bullshit. There's so many layers of bullshit, and they're all cost, right? I mean, I've railed for a long time about this stuff in healthcare. You've got healthcare it went from 4% of gross domestic product in the United States to 20 today. Okay, it's a multiple of 5. Every hospital has another building right next door to it that's full of billing clerks. Okay, you could solve the entire cost and insurance problem in the United States from the standpoint of healthcare in an afternoon. All you have to do is blow that building up, okay, and tell them, by the way, everybody's paying the same price. You have to post a price, and insurance companies cannot intermediate any of this. All transactions must be between the customer and the provider of the good or the service, period. End of conversation. Now, that doesn't mean you can't buy insurance. It just means that you get the bill and you send it to the insurance company, and maybe they pay you something back. You pay the bill, then maybe you get some of it back, maybe you don't. Maybe you pay an interest charge because you have to wait for them to fork it, okay? Or maybe they don't. And that conversation and that negotiations is between you and the insurance company. It's not between the insurance company and the physician or the hospital. Now, if you did that, prices would fall like a stone. Because now, how many billing clerks do I need in the hospital? 2? Right? Because the printer spits it out and sends it to you, right? Or it comes up on your phone or whatever, it gets emailed. Nowadays, you wouldn't even put a stamp on it. You'd send it to somebody by email, right? But everybody would get the same bill for the same thing. You know, when they had a stent put in your heart, it's $1,400 for the stent and $5,000 for the surgery. Okay, so $6,500, and that's it. It's not $4,000 for this guy and $40,000 for the other guy, right? I mean, you can't play that game anymore. And now, if I need one of these things, I'm going to call all 5 hospitals within 100 miles of me. What's your price? We could fix this in an afternoon, but we won't, because there'd be an instant serious recession, because all those people will be out of work. They're doing that screwing right now, both in the hospital and also in the insurance building. Those guys would be gone too. All right. You got 2 whole cadres of people whose job it is to bend you over the table and take turns. I mean, that's their job. And by the way, since nobody goes to jail for collusion, they don't negotiate prices down, they negotiate them up. Why not? Insurance companies are limited on their operating margin. If you can only make 10%, do you want to make 10% of $100,000? Do you want to make 10% of $1 million? Well, gee, that one's not very hard to figure out, right? So everybody's going to try to make $1 million. And since there's, nobody goes to prison, even though it's been illegal for over 100 years. All right, I mean, the Sherman Act dates to like 1890. I think it's 1890. Clayton was passed in 1914. Because people said they got prosecuted under Sherman. They said, well, we tried to monopolize, but we didn't succeed. Therefore, you can't jail us. And Congress turned around and said, nice try, assholes. We're going to make the attempt just as illegal as the success. Okay. But that was, I mean, this literally dates back more than 100 years. And yet, and the medical industry tried to argue they were exempt, the insurance firms and such. The case went to the Supreme Court in 1979. The Supreme Court threw it back and said, no, you're not exempt. There's another law, an insurance law called McCarran-Ferguson, that allows insurance companies to share information. So that's why if you get like 3 DUIs with one car insurance company, you go to the next one, they can find out that you have 3 DUIs. They can share their data that they have that, or that you wrecked 4 cars, okay, even if there wasn't a criminal charge or whatever. But that's McCarran-Ferguson allows them to do that, and the Supreme Court said, no, this kind of pricing garbage is not the business of insurance. The part they didn't say out loud, but they did, you just have to read between the lines, is what you're really involved in is screwing people. That's illegal. Okay. And so, I mean, but again, this was decided in 1979 and there hasn't been a single indictment since. So we live in a world where this kind of game playing, this kind of ratchet job has been going on now for decades. Right? You have the same kind of thing going on with these app stores that, people say, well, it's not a monopoly because there's Apple and there's Android. So if you don't like one, you can go to the other. Oh, but they both have the same basic policy, right? You can only load things off their app store. And if you jailbreak the unit to get around that problem, all the banking apps don't work. Oh, how did we collude to make that happen? They all check the security and say, "Oh, you circumvented this. Screw you. You can't do anything online." Oh, by the way, how do you do any of those things online without having access to those things these days? How do you live your life without doing that? People try to say, "Well, what if I don't want to pay the $100 for the broadband internet connection?" Well, then you can't find out what your kids' school assignments are because they don't send them home on paper anymore. All right, so that's now a price of participation in the economy and in life. It's not optional. And yet they say, well, but it's so much better than it was when it was dial-up internet. So, well, that's true, it is. But I don't have the option to buy the old one because no one sells it anymore. AOL just shut down the last example of it. And even so, it's non-functional in today's world. Okay, and yet I can't choose to go without it. If you say, well, I don't want to pay the premium for the really, really nice television. Well, they don't make the CRT ones anymore. Oh, well, but you don't have to have a TV to participate in society. Okay, you have to have transportation. You have to, what do you do if you break your leg and somebody's got to set it, right? You get in a car accident or whatever. So I mean, these ratchet jobs are all throughout the economy, and the problem that everybody has is you say, well, you just have to suck it up and make it work. There's an issue with that, which is that young people have a veto. Okay, you do the same kind of thing here, and then you add on to that the child care costs. All right, our solution to inflation in the 1970s, which was mostly Nixon and Ford, Carter got the blame for it. But the solution to that was to force women out of the house and into the workforce. And when that started with the kids in at least middle school, you had the whole generation that was called latchkey kids. You came home from school and basically you're in the house until mom got home, right? Well, then we ratcheted that down to the point that now you need daycares for infants. Well, okay, that for a couple of kids is what, 30 grand a year? $30,000 a year, $1,000 a month per kid, something like this, right? You can't make that work unless you've got a $150,000 income between the two of you. Your wife goes to work or you go to work, and when neither of you stays home, you both go to work. Basically, none of that second salary ends up going to the improvement in your standard of living, because it all gets sucked up by the health care and the child care costs if you have children. So what happens? Well, people decide not to have any kids. How do they get away from it? Well, that's one way. That's a veto you can't overrule. And you see it in the data. It's very clear. And it takes 20 years to decide to have a child and grow that child to adulthood. From the time you make the decision, you don't get the kid in the workforce being productive for 20 years. Like it or not, that's the way it works. If we continue to do this in another 10 or 20 years, you're not going to have to worry about house prices. You're not going to have to worry about asset prices, because you're not going to have any people who are going to be able to wipe the old people's ass. And there aren't going to be any young people that want to buy your house when you don't need the large house anymore.
So the houses will just plummet.
Well, the value, supply and demand is the first law of economics, okay? There are no exceptions to it. It's the way it works.
And we were talking about, perfect segue for the price of cars, and we've talked about this before. I mean, I'm still in the market for a used small SUV, and right. I went to the dealership. I don't know if this was probably after the last time I talked to you, but our new RAV4 is $40 grand.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I'm just not going to do it, Carl. I'm not paying
Well,
that.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you. I have two vehicles. They're both in perfectly good condition. They're not going anywhere for the time being. So,
Yeah, weren't you looking at something and the price tag on it, brand new, it was like, was it 50 or 75 grand or something? And you were like, no way.
oh yeah, I mean, I've looked at a bunch of stuff, and it's like there's no chance. I would like to swap out my truck for something newer and with more capacity, 3/4 tons to have a half ton. Um, at these prices, not a snowball's chance in hell. Plus the reliability problems that have been built in by the mandates within the government. Okay, I mean, the CAFE standards have forced all kinds of things that have destroyed the reliability of the drivetrains.
What
Right, cylinder
agencies that
deact.
fall under? What agencies that fall under that they put?
Um, so that's the CAFE standards, the fuel economy standards. So it's mostly EPA, but not entirely. And part of the problem is that it forces essentially what happens is the manufacturer, so General Motors, for example, for every fraction of a mile per gallon that their fleet fails to meet the standards, they have to pay a fine, and it's computed by the amount that they fail. So they are incentivized to do things like chase the last tenth of a mile per gallon with things like cylinder deactivation, much thinner oils, uh, shaving tolerances with variable oil pressure pumps and things like this. And assuming that your engineering is totally up to snuff, this kind of sort of mostly works out okay. The problem comes when you get the intersection. Everything in engineering has a margin, right? It has a safety margin between it's okay and it's going to break. When you shave that too close, the breaking starts. And what you're seeing now in all of these is exactly that. So Allison just recently told General Motors to take their badging off GM's trucks for the transmissions. And the reason is that all the 10-speed transmissions, it doesn't matter who makes them, all of them are blowing up at a ridiculously high rate, and they're hideously expensive when they fail. So if it happens to you out of warranty, you're looking at 10 grand. Okay. And then you've got engine failures that are happening in these things. And this is all from trying to shave that last tenth of a mile per gallon. Same thing with transmissions. The only reason they went to 10 speeds instead of 6 speeds is that you get about a half a mile a gallon better fuel economy. It's just, you're trying to put too much crap in too small a box. I mean, that's essentially why they're failing, is that you've run up against the engineering limits of reliability. And the manufacturers do it because the alternative is that's another $500 fine per vehicle. Well, when you find the corner, the customer gets it in the butt. And so the reliability of all of these vehicles has been destroyed. You take 4 or 5 of these things and that all of them have a damaging impact on reliability, and the odds that one of them is going to get you after the warranty runs out is pretty high.
Yeah, and the used market is still insane. A
Yeah,
100,000
yeah.
or 100,000 miles. 2019 or an 18 Hyundai Santa Fe, and they're asking 14, 15 grand. And I'm like, you're insane. I'm never going to pay that.
Yeah, they're out of their mind. And that one of the things that Trump said he was going to do that he hasn't done, and I don't know if he actually has to have Congress, if Congress would have to pass this. I don't think he can reverse all of this through executive action. I think some of this has to go through Congress. Um, but one of the things that could be done would be to ditch those standards entirely and allow customers to basically decide. If you rolled back some of those emission standards, and especially the fuel economy ones, the emissions ones, the basic problem you have is that 80% of any problem is really easy to solve. But we got to the point that it is actually hard to kill yourself by breathing the exhaust from a modern gasoline-powered vehicle in the early 2000s. They are that clean. Now, with the efficiency that high, what's left to gain is not much. Okay, so we've been fighting over the last couple of % that we can get at 5 times the expense. And at the same time, the reliability goes in the toilet. So you go from a basic low pressure fuel injection system, very simple, nothing complicated about it. It's got a pump in the tank and it's got injectors into the intake tract. They work perfectly well. They're easy to work on, they're easy to repair, and they're cheap. And then you end up with high pressure direct injection systems. You got two pumps now. You've got, PSI levels instead of 60 PSI on a fuel rail, you got 5,000. If there's a leak in one of those injectors, the engine gets destroyed if it's not detected immediately. You're very unlikely to be able to do that before the damage happens. They're extremely expensive, as you can imagine, to work on. They're dangerous as hell because if there's a leak, you get an instant fire. Okay, so the level of skill required to work on them and the amount of parts that have to be replaced anytime you touch it goes way up, and the reliability of the engine goes way down. And that's just one example of dozens. And you're chasing the last 2 miles a gallon doing this, all of this stuff combined. And you get to the point now where it's, you're chasing the last 1/10 of a mile a gallon because the ratchet job keeps going. You kept getting higher and higher standards, and the only way to meet them was to do those things. It's stupid.
Well, and also, the subprime auto loans that they've been issuing out to people, which I think now is coming to an end. They're giving 7-year loans for used cars.
You can't.
Did you see that though? They have 7-year. They have 84 a month for a used car.
Well, and Michael, part of this is that much of this and exactly how stupid it is depends on where you live, right? To some extent. All right. So I mean, I've got a 20-year vehicle and a 10-year-old vehicle sitting in my driveway. All right. One's in the garage, one's in the driveway. Both are in perfectly good mechanical condition, and the cosmetics on the truck are horrible, but on the car not so much because it's been in the garage the whole time. But neither of them has any kind of significant corrosion damage or anything like that in the frame and the running gear and that sort of stuff. And the reason is I don't live in a place where they salt the roads. Now, you take that same vehicle and you take it up into Michigan, and in 5 years it's trash. And it's because they brine the living hell out of everything. All right, and every single year. I mean, I lived in that environment for quite some time, all right, in the Midwest, where they do that on a constant basis between Michigan and the Chicago area. So Chicago is just as bad, if not worse, arguably in many cases worse.
Cleveland, same thing.
And yeah, and the entire Midwest and the snow belt. Part of the reason, and even down here they use that brine crap now, but before it was more local to things in the reasonable driving distance to Detroit because they have the salt mines under the city. Now, because everybody screams about the roads not being completely clear, they do it, and that stuff eats metal. There's anything you can really do about it. Okay, so the idea that you're going to have a vehicle that's going to be okay 10 years from now is absolutely ludicrous. Even though there have been advancements in the drivelines, but I mean but it depends on the car. Okay, GM is having a terrible problem with some of their 6.2 liters, which I think I and a few other people kind of know what's causing it. They just ran into engineering tolerances versus the ratchet job with the EPA. All right. On the other hand, the same kind of oil recommendations in my Mazda, I've got almost 300,000 miles on it, no problems. But the Japanese are just better at keeping those engineering tolerances where they need to be. Okay, the manufacturers that make the parts for the American cars, not so much. All right, but those tolerances, maintaining them costs money. So, where is the line? And as you continue to push those lines, you're going to find the failures. And we need to reverse all that stupidity. It's nuts. Okay, people say, well, it's better for the environment because you get one mile a gallon better in your truck. Okay, I get 1 mile a gallon better in my truck. However, instead of my truck lasting for 20 years, it lasts for 5, and then it blows up. And I get a $15,000 repair bill, which I don't got. Okay, now I'm underwater. now gets repoed, then they come after me. Now my credit's ruined. By the way, I had to buy another car too. So please explain to me how it's better for the environment. I had to make a second vehicle because I have to have something to drive.
Where does this go then, the used market? Do you think the prices are going to come down as well? Because if the subprime, if there is not going to be lending available, I mean, it's just there's going to be more cars out there.
Yeah, and supply and demand, like I started with, and the stuff with AI and everything else, it's not a suggestion. The cash for clunkers thing that was done was an intentional destruction of the used vehicle supply. All right. That was beyond stupid and into the realm of malicious. That was an absolutely malicious act.
What was the goal of that then?
To get the less efficient, more polluting vehicles off the road, which it did. And the problem is, that's used car supply. Now, they had to be destroyed to get the money. You had to destroy the drive line. So, those were the rules. So it was, yeah. And that's, we're still paying for that. And that was a deliberate act of destruction that was done by the administration.
It was Obama, right?
Yeah, that was deliberate arson aimed at the consumer and their wallet.
People don't hate these governments enough with some of this stuff.
There's dozens of examples, okay, and there's this whole kerfluffle over Obamacare right now, and the subsidies, and there's all kinds of rumblings of what Trump's going to propose and do and down and okay, all you got to do is start arresting people. That's it. 10 sets of handcuffs. We'll solve it in an afternoon.
But they're never going to do that. I mean, at this
point.
point.
Well, they're going to have to do it because otherwise, the more cost shifting you do, the higher inflation goes. If I can make you pay my bill, I don't care what the bill is, right? I mean, if you think about it, if I never see the bill, somebody else gets it. Well, you spread that across 330 million people, and everybody becomes incentivized to do that. How are you ever going to control costs?
What's your opinion? I know we're kind of getting close to the end here, but what's your opinion of the administration as we're closing out the end of the year and coming on to year two?
Well, he's running out of rope or runway, depending on how you look at it. Seems to be doing 100 knots with the flaps still up on the plane, and the end marker on the runway is in sight. He's going to pile into the barrier at this rate. If he doesn't solve the affordability problem, and there's really only one way to do it. You have to gut the medical system like a fish. There isn't anywhere else to go. It's just it's too big of a percentage of the budget, and it is the cause of all of the deficit spending, which is where all the inflation comes from. He has to do that, which he can do. Okay, now there's other things he needs to take on as well. The higher education system and the forcing all the funding through the federal government, the loans and everything else. There's all kinds of other areas that need to be attacked. However, those all take Congress. Congress is not going to do it. The problem is that if he doesn't get this under control, basically now, he's going to lose the House. And once he does, he starts a cascade that results in a loss of the presidency in 2028. And in the 2 years between 2026 and 2028, he gets impeached, and absolutely nothing that he wants to do gets done. Doesn't matter what it is, absolutely none of it gets done. Because Hakeem Jeffries is going to be Speaker. And, MTG, Marjorie just resigned, right? She sees that. That's the reason she quit. Because there were a bunch of promises made. And by the way, throw out all the illegal immigrants was one of them. Okay. If you actually do it, which again, you can do using existing law because 8 U.S.C. 1324 says that it is a felony, is a crime, not a civil offense, a crime to harbor, bring in, or maintain illegal immigrants in the United States, including employment. So if you started arresting people, all those jobs will go away, right? You look at what happened in Charlotte just over the last couple of weeks. They showed up and started arresting a handful of serious criminals that also happen to be illegal immigrants, okay? People that like to diddle kids, for example, all right? I mean, rapists and, murderers, armed robbery, things like this. Okay, they roll up, 40 or 50 of them, and all of a sudden, every single construction site in Charlotte's empty.
It was in the public schools. Was it 30% of the kids were gone?
Yeah. Okay.
Where do they go, Carl? Where do these people go?
Well, where they don't go is to work, right? All right. So now you have constructive knowledge that all these employers have been knowingly doing this. People say it's a victimless crime because they use somebody else's social security number. No, it's not. The New York Times, I think it was, ran an article where they tried to play the sympathy element on this. And they tracked down both the guy who had his identity robbed and the guy who did the robbing. As it turned out, the guy who did the robbing had been deported like 8 times, had 3 DUIs. He was a really nice dude, right? The guy that had his identity stolen got screwed repeatedly because the IRS came after him for taxes that hadn't been paid on his social security number that this guy had stolen. Okay, so he's got the IRS crawling up his butt, claiming that he owes him a crap ton of money. They're threatening to seize his bank accounts and basically destroy this guy. All right, he didn't do anything wrong. I mean, he's the American citizen that got hosed. And they tried to make this some pity party for this guy who's getting deported. I'm like, you kind of made my argument, which is that they all need to leave, like right now. All right, but this is the thing, is that if you were to do that, leave aside the social side of it, all right, the liberal versus conservatives or whatever, because I ask the liberals, what are you trying to liberate? I ask the conservatives, what are you trying to conserve, right? But let's just look at the economic impact. If you did that, the cost of housing would collapse. It would crash like a stone. Why? Because all those people need somewhere to live. The cost of groceries would collapse. Why? They're all eating, aren't they? Okay. Cost of car insurance would go down. Why? Because they're driving without any and smashing into people once in a while. They don't have any money and they don't have any insurance, so what does that do to yours? All right. Medical care cost would go down. Why? Because they get hurt like everybody else. They go to the hospital, they don't have any insurance. And they also don't have any money. So, and whether you agree with the policy or not, that's what he ran on. All right, that's what Trump ran on. That's why he won. And the same thing's true with the healthcare side of things. He ran on those policies. He hasn't delivered on them. And at this point, I don't know that he's got enough time to actually do it. Marjorie doesn't think so. That's why she's resigning. She's like, well, why do I want to get primaried and go through that fight? She might be able to win that fight, by the way, okay? Because she can raise quite a bit of money on her own just because there's a lot of people like her. Okay, so let's say that she wins the primary fight and she's in a relatively safe district in terms of Republican versus Democrat. Okay, and then they lose the majority anyway. She doesn't have any committee assignments. She doesn't get to do anything. She sits there with her finger up her butt for the next 2 years, and then they lose the White House. Then the GOP loses the White House. Why do you want to do that? She doesn't need the money. She's got plenty of cash. She doesn't need her congressional salary. She doesn't need to be able to grift off, insider trading. Okay. She could just say, screw this. I mean, I think she's got something like 10 or $15 million. That's enough money. She doesn't care. If she can't actually, get any of the things that everybody put her and everybody else in office for, why would you stay? Especially when you're convinced that the House is lost in the midterm elections, unless this stuff is changed and Trump's had a year and he hasn't done any of it. Okay, well, why would I believe he's going to change?
I'm curious when if they I don't know if they've left yet ice in Charlotte. I mean, if they came through Phoenix right now, there's so much construction going on here. I couldn't even imagine. I mean, I don't know, 2/3 of the city would probably hollow out. I mean, we're bordering Mexico. Like,
You know, I, you have people that say, "Oh, well, you go into Home Depot, on 6:30 in the morning, and there ain't nobody in there." Yeah, well, it was all Mexicans before. I mean, so I mean, um, I don't have a problem with legal immigration within reasonable limits, but I saw something like a third of the population of Charlotte's foreign-born.
God,
That's
if it's a third in Charlotte, I wonder what it is here. I wonder what it is in Phoenix or
I mean
L.A.
that's I mean that's
But
mind-boggling.
it's got to be
If you think,
higher. Don't you think it's got to be higher in L.A.
well,
and Phoenix?
well, I don't know, but I mean if you think about that, that's mind-boggling. What percentage of those people are here legally? I mean, I don't know, obviously, but I that those kinds of I mean, I'm not even sure I believe a number like that, but maybe it's true, maybe it's not. But I was like, what? And but people say it's too damned expensive to live here. Well, if you threw out a third of the people, it wouldn't be, would it? Right? I mean, what do you think the cost of an apartment would be under that circumstance? Half what it is now?
We didn't even get a chance to talk about Bitcoin and the fall of Bitcoin.
Well, that's okay. So a good part of that is being driven by there is a very real issue. Well, it's two really. The easy one is that the IRS has had enough of people hiding assets overseas. If you're a taxpayer in the United States and you've been doing that, you're about to get it in the butt. And brokerages are going to have to report this. All of the clearinghouses that allow U.S. customers to do business in the United States, all transactions, and cost basis is going to have to be reported starting next year. But the transactions are going to have to be reported starting this year, this tax year, including ones that are based overseas. And a huge number of people believed that they could get around the reporting and tax paying part of this run up by using overseas exchanges. No. Okay, that's the first problem. Um, there is an awful lot of people that have been cheating, and they're about to get the bill with the interest and penalties, whether they like it or not. That loophole is going to be slammed shut. And I have warned people forever that it is absolutely stupid to screw the IRS because there is no statute of limitations on intentional evasion. And as soon as it gets worth it, you'll seem to get away with it for a while. As soon as it's worth it for them to come after you, they're going to do it, and they're going to catch you, and they've got the records, and you're cooked. I know someone that ran a drinking and carousing establishment that apparently, from word on the street anyway, I don't know if it's true, but word on the street is they tried to screw the IRS on payroll tax deposits and got away with it for a while. And then all of a sudden, here they come. And of course, they didn't have it. So bye-bye, all done. Padlock on the door. Business gone. It's over. Probably personal bankruptcy behind that as well. So yeah, no fun. Not worth doing. Just pay the damn taxes. Okay, I mean, no one likes it, but But then the other problem is that the yen over in Japan, the interest rate had been pinned at zero for several decades now, right? Since their crash. And that is now going away. Now, there is still a very significant carry trade across border. And the problem is that the market rates on Japanese securities are rising rapidly, and they are threatening to make that not only uneconomic, in other words, you don't make anything doing it, but to actually make it run in reverse. So now it's going to cost you, whereas before it had essentially been a cost-free, risk-free transaction. I have no clue how many turns of the crank are in those trades that those people put on. But the whole game was that they were going after 1% and 2% returns. Nobody goes after 1% and 2% returns. They do it, they take it, they put it back through the system, and they do it again. They turn the leverage crank. So some of these trades are probably levered up 10, 15, 20 times, which is how they're getting the money that they're making. Those things reverse, and they're going to be forced to unwind them. That is going to be extremely violent, and I don't know where that money is, but it has gone into the markets in all kinds of different places. And when that comes apart, it is going to be serious. And there's absolutely nothing that the Federal Reserve or anybody else here in the United States can do to stop it. Nothing.
Can't the Bank of Japan just pump in liquidity though?
But why would they? The rates are going up over there on purpose because of what they're doing. Now they just announced some kind of support thing a few days ago. And people were, yeah, okay. No, it's a relatively small amount of money, okay, and it's targeted. The problem that Japan has is that they did this for several decades, and what they ended up with was a collapsed housing system. You've got homes outside of the major cities that are sitting vacant, millions of them, and in places like Tokyo, the prices have fallen in some cases by half or more. They've got a frozen economy over there in real terms. You could do this kind of thing and prop it up and play the game for a very long period of time, but eventually you run out of rope on this. And it appears that the Japanese government has realized that we have to stop this. We can't do it anymore. It's hurting us. It's not doing us any good. It didn't work. It has to be unwound.
Where can people find you, Karl?
Market-ticker.org, and there's a bunch of stuff behind the front screen that you don't see. And to get access to that, you click the button, the green thing that says contribute on the right-hand side of the articles.
As always, I appreciate your conversation. Have a great Thanksgiving, and
Yeah.
we'll probably have to do another one of these before the end of the year. Maybe after the next Fed meeting, rate cut.
Yeah, I suspect you're going to get that quarter point, but I think it's a tremendous mistake. Maybe a critical mistake. Certainly, the rumor is that Waller is the guy that Trump wants and Bissett wants as the next Fed chair, and he's been making noise that rates should be lower. Okay, we'll see how that works out with the inflationary impulse that will ignite, especially if Trump gets his $2,000 tariff dividends.
I mean, the universal basic income that they're talking about, basically.
You're still paying about 10 grand a year in extra expense in your household if you're a median income earner in the United States because of the COVID checks, and you will pay that $10,000 for the rest of your life every year. That's the monetary reality of what they did. Is that you didn't actually get that 4 or 5 or 6 grand or whatever it ended up being. You gave it all back and more in the first year, and you're continuing to do it every year thereafter.
People, like I said before, people don't hate these governments enough.
It was stupid then, and it's stupid now. So,
till our next conversation, Karl.
You bet.
Mic drop.